Alright guys, Shepherdess at Harmony Farms here to answer your questions. Questions like, what's the difference between white Dorper and black-headed Dorper? What do I do for bottle jaw? Why do you use dewormer as a regenerative rancher? Now I receive a lot of questions in a week's time. I try to answer them all, either based on my research, what I do here at my farm, or I will pull answers from my network of farmers and ranchers that I am in contact with on a regular basis. So instead of replying to each of these individual messages, I will likely be putting up a once-a-week video. And full disclaimer, I am not a veterinarian, so take any medical questions to your veterinarian before implementing them on your farm. I am not liable for anything bad that happens to you. So I'm going to go with today's questions, beginning with Sandy. Sandy says, how did you choose the black and white Dorper variety instead of the all-white Dorper? Are there any differences between these two breeds? And are the all-white harder to find? We are looking into starting up our own small flock in the near future, and we're wondering about the two varieties. I ultimately chose the black-headed Dorper because it was what was immediately available to me. However, after further research and as I have built the flock independently by buying in more black-headed Dorper, I have decided to go for all black head. Here's why. Based on my evaluation of different auctions and high-profile sales venues, the black-headed Dorper will bring anywhere from 30 to 50% more at auction based on my evaluation. Another thing, and it goes back to a conversation I had with my friend Carl Abel, and it is this. I believe it is harder to hide mixed breed in a black-headed Dorper than it would be in a white-headed Dorper. I was talking to, again, my friend Carl Abel, and he said, I chose black cattle because they receive a higher market value at these various auctions that I take them to. And the reason being, it's hard to hide a mix in a black Angus cow. Those mixes will come out visually in the animal itself. And that is true as well of a black-headed Dorper. It's very hard to retain that solid jet black head if another breed has been mixed in to the animal up the line somewhere. So it's kind of a quality thing on my front. And white Dorpers, they're just not as distinguishable. And for marketing, for me, it's blackhead all the way. Question number 2 is, you mentioned the importance of buying from an operation that is grass-based, and to ask about their use of vaccines or not. Regarding the vaccines, were you able to buy your registered full-blood sheep without any immunizations? And was it hard to find an operation that did not vaccinate? Vaccination has not been a part of our program for 2 years. We run a closed flock on clean pasture, and it's just not been a necessity. My philosophy on vaccinations, I'm kind of an advocate for them for breeding animals. I don't want to eat a vaccinated animal, but I will likely vaccinate my breeders. And the vaccination thing is for a totally different video as far as addressing it in detail. But all that to say is that the stock that I bought in was vaccinated. Another question is, when will you have more stock for sale? Next availability of Shepherdess Dorpers is going to be March 2022. When the lambs come, I'm going to take pre-orders on them, and then there's going to be a pickup day at weaning, Lord willing, on that front. Elliot writes, G'day Shepherdess, thanks heaps for posting useful content. Thank you, Elliot. Seeing as though you have a lot of parasites in your particular area, I was wondering if you had had bottle jaw in your flock. One of my ewes has it, and I am not sure how to treat it. Yes, parasites are very heavy in my area given the humidity, temperature, and annual rainfall, and bottle jaw is something that does happen. Thankfully not too frequently, but I did just get off a bottle jaw instance with one of my ewes, and here is exactly what I did. I ran a dewormer on her, and what I did was, after running the dewormer, which I dewormed with Prohibit, I gave her a couple of days worth of really nutrient-rich feed and vitamins and minerals, so that while that dewormer kicked in, she would have the nutritional stuff she needed to keep going. And what that was it was alfalfa pellets covered in Nutri-Drench and mixed with some loose mineral. This I fed for about 2 days while she kind of regained some vigor. It takes a little while for the dewormer to kick in, and thank the Lord, she recovered fully from her bottle jaw and is living her best life on pasture. Bottle jaw is the very final stages of a very serious barber poleworm infection. In this particular animal, she lambed late and did not get into the standard post-lambing dewormer round that we run on our flock. And so she was just overtaken at that really vulnerable point in time in her life. But thankfully she did rebound from it and she is doing very well now. Doesn't always happen. Barber poleworm, that's the very last stage of infection. So when you see it, you need to treat it very immediately and very seriously. And guys, yes, I do use conventional dewormers on my farm. That is a practice that I hold to. While I do cull for animals that are perpetually anemic or that need it too much, it is a practice on my farm. Somebody wrote in the comments and said, "Why do you use dewormer as a regenerative rancher? Don't you know it kills soil biology, earthworms, and beetles?" Which is a good point. When I run dewormer, I will leave the flock in a dry gated corral for about 24 hours. This allows the dewormer to pass through their system and exit their body through their manure, and that manure stays on a dry lot and does not pass onto the pasture. And therefore, very little chemical residual will actually make it to the pasture from these dewormings. Zachary asks, why did you stick with Dorper over all other breeds? He says, I know it was what was immediately available to you, but what kept you from transitioning to another breed? I stuck with Dorper primarily because the carcass weight is so advantageous. A well-fed Dorper lamb can be 100 pounds on just grass and mom's milk by 4 months old. If you feed supplement, you can get up to a 135-pound animal by 4 or 5 months. The ram that I just brought in was around 130 pounds. He was on some feed supplement as well as pasture, and he was only 5 months old. That is a big deal. In fact, I have talked with some market farmers who have had St. Croix in the past, and they eventually got rid of lamb from their program because the carcass weight on St. Croix was so small they were unable to turn a profit on each animal simply because they weren't able to get enough meat off of those animals. And I've heard similar from farmers of katahdin. They said katahdins just have smaller carcasses, and some of the katahdin farmers I know will actually bring in a Dorper ram every other year to beef up their carcass weight. So again, the Dorper is kind of superior with respect to forage conversion and a meaty animal at the end of the day. Anonymous writes, I've had my sheep for 2 months and I love it. I haven't done much as far as rotational grazing them. I'm just letting them graze my acreage for now. Unfortunately, one of my sheep has developed runny stools, or scours, and I don't know what to do. She seems fine otherwise, eating and drinking and grazing. It's just not normal on the backside. Ultimately, check with your vet, but here's what I would do if this was happening on my farm. I would run a fecal egg count and get an idea of what is in those runny stools. If I ran that count in collaboration with checking the eyelids, you want to pull the eyelid down. And if it's really white in there, she's got worms and she is suffering from a parasite overload. Typically, coccidia will cause the runny stools. Barber poleworm does not. But coccidia is very common for young lambs. That said, it's not always a parasite overload. Sometimes a young lamb can just have something that upsets its stomach. However, if it's a long, drawn-out season of scours, it's more than likely parasites. Lambs have very little to no immunity in their first year to parasites, and so you may need to be extra vigilant if the animal is 1 year or less. Take a fecal sample, check the eyelids, deworm if you want to keep the animal, and you should be on your way with a healthy animal at the end of it all. Guys, thank you so much for these questions, and if you have any more, email me at shepherdess@harmonyfarms.blog. Like I said, I may not have all the answers myself, but I would be glad to scour my network to get the answers you need to your questions. Thank you so much for watching. Give it a thumbs up if you found it valuable, comment below, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.